1964, a year of significant social change, marked the presidential face-off between Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson and Republican Barry Goldwater. Johnson, who stepped into the presidential role following John F. Kennedy's assassination, was propelled to victory by a landslide. His successful handling of the Civil Rights Act and Goldwater's extreme foreign policy views tipped the scales in his favor, showing the nation's preference for diplomacy over conflict. Just 4 years later, in 1968, the political landscape shifted dramatically. This time it was Richard Nixon for the Republicans, Hubert Humphrey for the Democrats, and a third contender, George Wallace from the American Independent Party. This election was drenched in contention, with the shadow of the Vietnam War and civil unrest looming large. Ultimately, Nixon emerged victorious, but by a narrow margin. His win signaled a growing divide within the nation, as Americans grappled with the turbulence of the times. The political climate of these years was charged, to say the least. From civil rights movements to anti-war protests, the country was experiencing a wave of transformation. These changes were reflected in the presidential elections, with voters increasingly swayed by candidates' stance on these issues. Johnson's landslide win in 1964 was a testament to his ability to navigate the country through a time of social upheaval, while Nixon's narrow victory in 1968 highlighted the nation's deepening divisions over the Vietnam War and civil rights. In the end, these elections were not just about choosing a leader. They were a reflection of the American people's hopes, fears, and aspirations during a time of significant change. They marked a shift in the political landscape, setting the stage for a new era of American politics marked by heightened social tensions and a polarizing war. These elections set the stage for a new era in American politics, marked by heightened social tensions and a polarizing war. As we stepped into the 70s, America was in turmoil, the political landscape marred by scandal and public disillusionment. The 1972 presidential election saw Richard Nixon, the Republican incumbent, take on George McGovern, the Democratic hopeful. Nixon's victory was a landslide, yet the triumph was short-lived. Beneath the surface, a political storm was brewing, one that would shake the very foundations of American democracy: the Watergate scandal. The Watergate scandal was a seismic event, a shocking revelation of political espionage, deceit, and unprecedented presidential misconduct. As the details of the scandal unraveled, the public's trust in the presidency dwindled. Nixon, once a victor, was now a symbol of a corrupted system. In 1974, under the weight of potential impeachment, Nixon resigned, leaving his vice president, Gerald Ford, to assume the presidency. But the tides of public sentiment had already turned, and the stage was set for a significant shift in the political landscape. Enter the 1976 presidential election, where a peanut farmer from Georgia, Jimmy Carter, emerged as the Democratic nominee. Facing off against Gerald Ford, Carter portrayed himself as an outsider, a breath of fresh air in a political climate riddled with scandal and skepticism. His promise: to restore integrity to the presidency, to bring honesty back to the White House. This message resonated with the American public, weary and wary of political scandal. Carter's victory, though a close one, marked a significant shift. It signaled a public desire for change, for a presidency that was open, honest, and accountable. This was a turning point, a moment in history where the outsider triumphed, and change was not just a promise but a mandate. The decade ended with an outsider in the Oval Office, a symbol of the public's desire for change. But as we'll see, the road to change is often a winding one, filled with unexpected turns and challenges that test the resilience of a nation and its leaders. The 1980s, often termed the Reagan era, a time of significant political shift in the United States. As the 1980 presidential election approached, the country was yearning for a change. Enter Ronald Reagan, the Republican nominee, running against the incumbent, Jimmy Carter. Reagan, a former Hollywood actor and governor of California, promised economic revitalization and a more assertive foreign policy. His charisma and optimism resonated with the American people, leading him to a landslide victory. By the time the 1984 presidential election rolled around, Reagan's popularity had only grown. The nation was experiencing a booming economy, and Reagan's strong leadership during the Cold War had bolstered his reputation. His opponent, Walter Mondale, struggled to gain traction against this backdrop, Reagan's campaign slogan, "It's morning again in America," encapsulated the optimistic outlook of the nation, and he again won in a historic landslide, carrying 49 of the 50 states. Reagan's presidency was not without controversy, however. Critics pointed out that while the economy boomed, income inequality grew. His administration's response to the AIDS crisis was heavily criticized, and the Iran-Contra affair, a scandal involving secret arms sales to Iran, marred his second term. But despite these controversies, Reagan's impact on American politics was undeniable. His belief in small government, lower taxes, and free market capitalism became tenets of the Republican Party, shaping its ideology for years to come. His strong stance against the Soviet Union also played a critical role in the eventual end of the Cold War. Even after his presidency, Reagan's influence lingered. His vice president, George H.W. Bush, succeeded him, promising to continue Reagan's conservative policies. And even today, Reagan's legacy is often invoked by politicians on both sides of the aisle. Reagan's presidency marked a shift towards conservative politics that would shape the country for years to come. The end of the Cold War brought a new set of challenges. The political landscape of America was changing, and the presidential elections of 1988 and 1992 were perfect examples of these shifts. In 1988, the nation saw George H.W. Bush, a Republican, pitted against Democrat Michael Dukakis. Bush, who was vice president under Reagan, managed to secure the presidency. He sought to continue Reagan's conservative policies, but his tenure was marred by economic challenges and criticism over his handling of domestic issues. Then, in 1992, we saw a three-way race unlike any other. Incumbent George H.W. Bush was up for re-election, but he found himself contending not only with Democrat Bill Clinton, but also with independent candidate Ross Perot. The election was a pivotal moment, with Clinton's focus on the economy and promise to bring change to Washington resonating with voters. Clinton's victory was significant for several reasons. For one, it marked the first time since 1976 that a Democrat had taken the White House. More importantly, though, it showed the growing influence of third-party candidates. Ross Perot, running as an independent, garnered nearly 19% of the popular vote, a feat not seen since Teddy Roosevelt's run as a third-party candidate in 1912. As the 90s progressed, the role of the American presidency began to evolve. With the end of the Cold War, the United States was no longer defined by a binary standoff with the Soviet Union. Instead, it found itself as a superpower in a more globalized and interconnected world. This change brought new challenges. Economic issues took center stage, and presidents were increasingly expected to navigate complex international relations. The role of technology in politics was also growing, with the internet becoming a powerful tool for campaigning and public engagement. The 90s saw a shift towards a more globalized and interconnected world, with new challenges for the American presidency. As we entered the new millennium, the presidential elections took a controversial turn. The year 2000 saw a nail-biting showdown between George W. Bush, the Republican candidate, and Al Gore, the Democratic hopeful. Bush, the son of former President George H.W. Bush, promised a compassionate conservatism, while Gore, Bill Clinton's vice president, focused on environmental issues and fiscal responsibility. The election night ended without a clear winner. The state of Florida, with its 25 electoral votes, became the battleground. The margin was so thin that a recount was triggered, but the recount process was fraught with legal challenges and disputes over hanging chads, partially punched ballots. The controversy reached the Supreme Court, which in a landmark decision halted the recount. The court's decision effectively handed the presidency to Bush, marking one of the most contentious endings to a presidential election in American history. Fast forward to 2004. The world had changed dramatically. The United States was deeply embroiled in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, following the horrific attacks of September 11, 2001. President Bush, seeking a second term, faced off against Democratic Senator John Kerry. Bush, despite being criticized for his handling of the Iraq War and the lack of weapons of mass destruction, focused his campaign on national security. Kerry, a decorated Vietnam War veteran, questioned the rationale for the Iraq War and promised a stronger alliance with international partners. However, Bush's message resonated with voters who were concerned about terrorism, and he secured a second term in office. Yet the war and its aftermath left deep divisions in the American society, fueling anti-war sentiments and leading to questions about America's role in the world. These elections underscored the increasing polarization in American politics. The start of the new millennium was marked by controversy and change, setting the stage for the seismic shifts in political dynamics that were yet to come. The 2008 election marked a historical milestone, as Barack Obama, a charismatic senator from Illinois, won a decisive victory over Arizona Senator John McCain. Obama's victory was not just a political triumph, but a cultural one. He became the first African-American president of the United States, promising hope, change, and a new beginning. Fast forward to 2012, and Obama is back in the race, this time facing off against Mitt Romney. Despite a sluggish economy, Obama's healthcare reform and a well-organized campaign saw him secure a second term. Yet, the winds of change were already stirring. In 2016, we witnessed a political upset of epic proportions. Enter Donald Trump, a businessman and reality TV star with no prior political experience. Up against Hillary Clinton, a seasoned politician, Trump's victory stunned the world, as he successfully tapped into a wave of populist discontent and a divided Democratic Party. The year 2020 brought with it unprecedented challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic ravaged the globe, and the United States was no exception. The election pitted incumbent Donald Trump against former Vice President Joe Biden. Biden's message of unity and his promise to address the pandemic and economic recovery resonated with voters, and he emerged victorious. The Obama era and beyond brought with it a new set of challenges and triumphs. From Obama's historical presidency to Trump's unexpected victory and Biden's pandemic-era leadership, each election cycle has been a reflection of the evolving American political landscape. These years have seen the rise of social media's influence, the resurgence of populism, and a deepening political divide. Yet they have also witnessed landmark moments for diversity and representation and the resilience of democratic institutions. These recent elections reflect a country grappling with change and uncertainty, yet still committed to the democratic process. As we look to future elections, we're reminded of the enduring power of the people's voice and the ongoing evolution of America's democratic journey. As we look to the future, the stage is set for the 2024 presidential election. While we can't predict specific outcomes or players, we can certainly anticipate the issues that might take center stage. Climate change, economic recovery, social justice, and healthcare reform are potential topics that could shape the election narrative. It's also likely we'll see candidates from diverse backgrounds, further illustrating the evolving face of American politics. But remember, history has taught us that predictions often fall short. The only certainty is uncertainty. The election could be swayed by unforeseen events, new political players, or unexpected issues. It's this unpredictability that makes the democratic process so fascinating and vital. As we anticipate the future, we're reminded of the enduring importance and vitality of the American democratic process. The past 60 years have shown us that democracy, despite its challenges, continues to evolve, reflecting the hopes and aspirations of its people.